Well, something just happened that's very important that I think few people will notice in the news. And I'll start with asking another simple question. Who do you think is the most important leader in the world today? And guess what? It's not Chairman Xi. It's not Donald J. for Genius Trump. It's Narendra Modi. What just happened? In a 600 million vote in a messy process over months, because so many people are scattered rurally there, Modi got reelected to a second term with a majority in parliament. He gained support when everybody thought he was going to lose and the country was dividing again. This has not happened in almost 50 years since Indira Gandhi won in 1971 with similar circumstances. This is a big deal. India is slated to be the largest country in the world, but that's going to take decades. Right now, it's a battle between U.S. and China. And in U.S. dollars, U.S. is still the #1 economy, but in purchasing power adjusted, China's already passed the U.S. But as I've preached, don't need to say this much more. China has massively overbuilt to do this and is about to face a major crisis. China's demographics and workforce are already slowing, and migrants are moving back to rural areas and no longer moving to the cities. They're a big multiplier. India is underinvested, is only 34% urban versus 59% for China. Massively more opportunity. And I've stressed recently, India, at the same point of urbanization, when China was 34%, India is 30% richer than China was 2.5 decades ago when they were at the same point. Our urbanization projections, which are very good, a little early stage for India to be totally accurate, but says when India becomes fully urban, their GDP per capita, adjusted for purchasing power, will be 35,000 versus China's 27,000. 30% difference again. India's population grows larger than China. Their spending wave goes up to 2055 or longer. China's is already pointing down. India is the country of the future. India is the next China. And economists, especially an Indian economist that I read from Morgan Stanley recently, have been arguing India can't be the next China. They're too messy. They're not top down, blah, blah, blah. And another reason this election, against predictions of Modi having what's now being called a landslide victory and cementing his power, Indians have a terrible habit, sarcastic habit of throwing out electing politicians and throwing them out just for the hell of it. We don't like politicians, so we'll give you one term and kick you out. This is the first guy again, reelected. So he's the most important person in the world to me. India is going to provide the type of growth to the world economy that China did in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. China has overbuilt so much, they still have to go from 59% to 85% or so urban. That will cause more growth, but their demographics will be working against it. I think it could take 5, maybe 10 years for China to catch up with its overbuilding when the rest of the world says, well, where do we invest now? Wealthy world with slow demographic growth, but more wealth from older people. They're going to see India. They're also going to see Southeast Asia. Another thing I saw just this morning in the World Competitiveness Index, the latest one, U.S. dropped from 2 to 3. Behind now Hong Kong, and Singapore's #1 in Southeast Asia. Indonesia jumped from number 35 to number 21, a huge leap. Thailand jumped from 25 to 20. I keep saying the next great boom is going to see developed countries grow even slower in many parts of the world, and emerging countries take the stage. And India and Southeast Asia are showing the best productivity and GDP per capita curve versus urbanization. Of course, Africa's got strong demographics, the Middle East, and of course they're going to grow and urbanize, but they're not getting the same productivity and benefits. The world is moving towards Asia. China will be a big part of that. China, India, and U.S. will be fighting who will be #1. China's already winning that war, although they'll have setbacks. Ultimately, I think decades down the road, India will be that. So what better knowledge than to see this now, especially with a great downturn coming, and say, wow, India's the place to invest, and Southeast Asia. That's where the demographics are, the productivity, increasing competitiveness. And Modi is seen as a progressive reform party. He's already taken public toilet access from 40% to 95%. Since 2005, the percentage of profits from publicly owned Indian companies has dropped from 56% to 10% in 2018, sweeping by China, which is still sagged down by massive state-owned companies. So this is progress. This is reforms. It's still going to be messy. Modi's got a lot of challenges, but I say he's the most important person in the world today. India is going to create more growth in the next 2 to 3 decades, especially into 2055. The next two booms for young people today in the U.S., they're going to create the most growth like China did from the early 80s up until recently. So keep an eye on India. We're certainly going to. And look for these little things in the news. Don't just look at the headlines. While China and U.S. are duking it out for number one, India is almost certain somewhere down the road, probably well after I'm dead, to become the number one economic power and the center of Asia, which everything is moving towards. So again, we'll keep you updated.